Okay, guys. So let's start. Hi friends. Welcome to our first virtual code event. Okay, we have named our event like Code Refresh. It's a Magento Meetup Lucknow event. Okay, I have with me Atish Goswami from Magento Meetup Nagpur, and we together we are going to take two sessions. Okay, one is on the GrumPHP and other one on the Magento 2 queues. Okay, so before I start, actually I can share you the link. You can open the slides from the first link, which is slide.com link. Okay. Others are our social pages, which are Magento Lucknow pages on Twitter, on Meetup itself. The other one is on Facebook. If anyone wants, he can just open the slides on his system, and I can like narrate or give you a demonstration. And okay, so when I can move forward, can you just give me a thing? Okay, so I'm moving forward. So first, when I was going to give this presentation offline, an actual meetup, physical meetup, so we actually explained what is Magento Meetup Lucknow, and the whole idea was to actually tell people. The whole idea was to actually tell people what is actually a meetup and how we can develop a community locally and help each other, and of course grow a Magento community here. Okay, so that's we have few points, and actually I started with differentiating between a conference and a meetup. So it's actually informal, and a lot of things can be discussed in a meetup. Okay, where conference is actually organized and structured, and people actually give presentation, and they ask questions, and actually discussion don't happen. Okay, so I thought a meetup could be something a little bit informal. Okay, and it's a get together, not a large event. Okay, so these are all things I used to discuss. So it's available in the slide, you can check on. And the next thing is our topic, which is the first topic is automated code quality check with GrumPHP. So what is Grum, and how can we actually automate our code in Magento? That's what we wanna discuss in this slide. Okay. So first thing is why we should actually automate. So as a developer, I truly understand my fellow developers that we are actually a little bit lazy. So developers are lazy. That's why we need about code quality checks. There are at least 6 to 7 tools that can like check. So running them individually on the code and then getting the result and then verifying and correcting it, it's a little like hectic task. Okay, so most of us like expect us to write code and push it to production, and we expect that it should work and nothing should fail in the deployment pipeline. So but certain times the production pipelines fail when they do an automatic check while merging the code. For example, if someone has been doing a Magento open source contribution, he might already know as Magento have a lot of coding tests which run automatically when you create a pull request. So those tests are actually run, and if they fail, you need to again correct and push. So it's actually again a thing that we should avoid. It's better that we run everything on a local and then push it to development or the Git branch. Okay, so The third point is we can actually enforce the automation. Uh, is now with the GrumPHP, you can just like add a listener, and the listener will not allow the developer to actually commit the code and push. So before every commit, it's run all that automation test cases, and then actually it's show the result. And those test case actually can be corrected by a few tools like PHP Code Standard Fixer and PHP CBF Code Beautifier. So those tools can also fix the code before the commit. Okay, so this actually reduces the possibility of getting a code which is failing in production. So we can actually enforce code quality checks. Okay. So next thing is what to automate actually. We have a lot of tool in Magento which are actually integrated by default. So first one is PHP Code Sniffer, and it's there is a Magento coding standard that it's actually validates. Okay, the standard is responsible for a lot of things like code styles and what should we do in comments, how we should comment our code, how we should actually use the indentations, and like for example, we should add a empty line in the last of a class, and we should not use closing tags. These are rule sets are available in Magento coding standard, and those rules are actually applied and checked by the PHP coding standard. Okay, the coding standard PHP CS have a other functionality, that is PHP CBF, that is PHP Code Beautifier. So what it is it's integrated into PHP CS only. So what it does is it actually tries to fix few of our styling and coding standard changes. For example, it's add a line in the end of file automatically when you run a CABF. It's actually do the proper indentation. A lot of things it does. Okay, but it's actually integrated with the PHP CS. So it's a small app like a tool, but we have a whole tool which actually auto fixes all these errors. Okay, let me check the connection. So everybody can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Raju, we
My
can
Yes.
hear
other
you.
okay, thank you. So what PHP CS Fixer is PHP coding standard fixer. Okay, so it's actually a dedicated tool to fix issues in our code that are quality issues, of course, and it has an independent rule set which can work with Magento coding standard as well, and we can add our own custom standards. And there are a lot of standards available in the market, like PSR standards. Okay, PSR 12 and PSR 2, and these standards are there. So against these standards, there's a rule set available, open source, and PHP CS tries to fix that. So it don't check the actually don't checks and gives us a report. It's actually fix the issues. Okay, so what is difference between CS and PHP CS Fixer? It's that one checks and gives you a report. The other one actually fixes it and doesn't actually give you what and where it there's an error. Okay. Beside these three tools which works on PHP qualities, coding quality, there's another tool which actually works on the performance and actually complexity of the code, that is PHP MD, that is PHP Mess Detector. Okay, all the links I have added in the reference. You can check that later. Okay, so that anybody who want to go into deep what these tools are, you can check that out. So what PHP MD does is like we learn how to calculate the psychomatic complexity, like how many for loops are there, how many loops inside loops, how many if conditions are there in a method. Okay, so those conditions actually sometimes make us make the performance or number of paths that happen in a method increases. So those paths actually decide how much time the PHP or a compiler will actually take the input and process it. So what Mess Detector does is it calculates the complexity and it's actually show you a notification in your IDs. Okay. Also, you can run the PHP MD and get a XML or YML or CSV error. Okay. So those reports can be actually checked, and all the code issues can be like refactor. We can refactor our methods and we can like refactor our classes. Okay, and we can reduce the complexity. So these tools are like old tools, and a lot of years has been like people are using these tools, the top four. But there is a new tool in market that is PHP Stan. It's a PHP static code analyzer. Okay, so what it does is it actually checks the code before it actually runs, and it's find out the missing things. Like for example, there is a missing return in a code. Okay, and someone is expecting that return. Okay, it actually find out. Suppose you create an object and it has a I don't have a method, but someone has used that method. Okay, so unavailable methods. It's actually detect those things, those kind of things. Okay, so it's also integrated into Magento with 2.3, and it's supported by default. Okay. Beside these tools, there are a few more things we can add it to our GrumPHP automation. For example, keywords. There are times when developer write die in the code and or use an object manager or do a console.log or those kind of keywords, and that are missed and or that are available in the comments and that are missed and actually pushed into production. And later on somebody sees those keywords and then do a cleanup, and these things happen. Okay, so what keywords do it? We can add few keywords, and those keywords are validated by the GrumPHP task runner. Okay, so whenever we do a commit, before the commit, these keywords are actually checked, and if available, the Grum do not allow us to commit. Okay, until we fix those errors. So beside this, the GrumPHP also checks for composer JSON. Okay, and we can actually validate the composer JSON. For example, if someone misses a name in the composer JSON, which is actually required. Okay, someone misses the PSR for namespaces or anything like that, the composer JSON is actually validated. Okay, so besides these 7 tools, we can create our own task and add it to GrumPHP. And GrumPHP actually provides a very good interface to write custom tasks. So we can create our own, and our own custom task can include, like, suppose checking the Swagger. Magento have a Swagger which actually fails when someone adds wrong inputs, wrong doc strings to the API classes or data classes or repositories. So the Swagger actually fails to render and run the UI. And beside this, we can actually add test case for DI compile. We can, before we commit and push the code to production, we can add a task that runs the code and compiles. If the compilation is successful, the code is okay. If the compilation fails, then still there is an error. Okay, so these custom checks can be added, and maybe somebody already have added. I didn't check. So this can actually make our code a very quality standard. Okay, improve our quality standard. Okay, so beside that, we already know what to automate. We have how to automate. Okay, so how to automate it's first thing, we are using the GrumPHP tool that is a simple task runner, and the task runner which can be hooked with the Git, and it's actually listens every commit and every merge and every pull. So on every commit, before the commit, it runs the task, and if the task is successful, you can commit. If the task fails, you get all the errors on the CLI, and after that you have to actually fix to commit. Okay, so it's actually restrict or enforce the developer to fix all the quality standard changes, and then actually push it into production or create a PR or merge request. Okay, so it's actually listen all the Git commits. Besides that, it can be configured at module level and project level. Suppose we are building a Magento website. So for that, and we are using a Magento monolithic structure, and we are not developing modules individually. So in that case, we can configure the GrumPHP at project level, and every code available in the app code will be actually processed and checked on each commit and on each merge. Okay. Beside this, I was using to develop modules independently, which can be used in multiple projects and can be sold as a product. So I was using at module level, and I was actually using the Git also at the module level. So for example, I have a module at my vendor and my module. So my Git was actually initialized as my module, and at that level only I have added the Grum listener. Okay, so I have there is a link for GrumPHP tool. Okay, and another link is I have actually created a great repository, and for Magento 2 I have created 2 configs. Okay, so the both configs are ready to use and can be copied to your project, and then you can actually start working. Okay, so it's open source and available in my Git repository. I've added the link, so you can go and check that out. Beside that, we can just start, and I can demonstrate how we can set up on our local. Okay, so our task includes actually 4 parts. First, we will install the GrumPHP. Then we will install the dependencies. Dependencies are our tools that we are using to check the quality. For example, PHP Cs, PHP MD, and so on. The third thing is we will do a configuration. Okay, we will add a GrumPHP configuration, and we will enable all those tools. And the fourth and the last thing is we will initialize the Git, and we will start initialize the Grum listener for the Git commit. Okay, so for this tutorial, I have already created a Magento sample module, and let me start my PHP Storm. Okay, so yes, links are actually, if anybody is facing any issue with the slide, you can just like scan this link and the slide will be available. All the links are added in the slide. Okay, and in the last page, there is a reference and all the links are here. So if let me hold for 5 minutes, just copy here the first link, which is the slide link. Okay, at https cut.ly/virtual-code-refresh. This is the slide link and it's available online. Okay, you can check all the links there, so nobody have to face any issue. Okay. Yes, yes, you can get the slides. These are open slides. Okay. Shall I share the link in the group? Just give me a minute. So you can check the slides on your own system, or if you are using mobile, you can check on the mobiles. Okay, I'm using the slides.com. It's a good site, and it's actually built on an open source library that is Reveal.js. Okay, so it's a HTML presentation. Okay, so if everybody is okay, I can like move on with the workshop. Okay. Okay, thank you. So let's me like continue with the demonstration. So as I told, we have a GrumPHP. Let me open it. So it's also an open source project and with MIT license. Okay, so this is the Grump logo, and they have a little bit of GIF here, how to run, how to do things. Okay, everything is here. So besides that, I have my own set of instructions. Okay, let me share the link of this also. Okay. So this is the Magento 2 configuration I have created, okay, long ago, and I've been using for like maybe 6 months or more, and it's working fine, and it's actually helping a lot so that I don't push code and then later correct it and then again create a pre-add. So it's helping me a lot. And so there's a little bit of description here. Okay, so let's start with the setup. Okay, let me open my PHP Storm. And okay, So I am using a Magento 2.4 version, which is the actually Git pull version, and I have created a sample module in that. Okay, for PHP Storm, our meetup is actually sponsored by PHP Storm. They are helping in with the free licenses for the IDE. Okay, so anybody who are interested in getting a free license can contact me. Okay, and every month they provide me 2 licenses, so I can share them. Okay, it's a very good IDE, and it's helped a lot in actually doing coding. A lot of actually quality checks are already integrated in PHP Storm, and they can be like the PHP Storm automatically applies them. Okay, so let us check that. So first thing is what the first thing is, we can either set up the GrumPHP globally. So for that we need 2 things. We need PHP and Composer installed globally. So I have been using multiple Docker setups parallel with the globally installed PHP, and yes, yes, we will share later. So what I suggest is we don't install the GrumPHP in every Docker container or in every project. Rather move it to a global Composer project. Okay, so for that minimum requirements is we need to install the PHP in the operating system, that is like sudo apt install php 7 like that. Okay, and beside that we can configure the Composer globally. Okay, and I'm assuring you that there will be no conflict with the Docker container. Okay, because PHP will run global with the PHP command, and Docker PHP will run inside the Docker, so there will be no conflict. And you can use this GrumPHP in any other projects, any other Docker run environment. Okay, so and you'll be like will not go through a lot of configuration stuff that requires with the Docker setup, because Docker has a PHP running inside it. So a lot of things are not actually available with that. Okay, so I suggest you to install it globally. So to install it, you need to run Composer global require. Okay, --dev php pro / grumphp. Okay, I have already installed in my system. Okay, so let's check. Okay. So for example, I am using PHP 7.3. Okay, and I have already installed Grum, but let me run it again. Okay. Also, Composer is also installed globally. Okay, so everything is fine now. The third thing is we should install the GrumPHP library. Okay, so I'm globally installing it, Composer global require. Okay, so it will check the all dependencies and everything, and it will install it in my user folder under the home adaptive.composer. Okay, so it's actually doing a version update because I think I installed it a lot time ago. So while this is running, I just move out to second thing. So GrumPHP can monitor each commit. Okay, so to monitor each commit, it needs to be installed inside a Git repository. So I'm using the module level setup. So because until now I was developing each module independently, so that those modules can be installed by a Composer or anything. Okay, so I'm installing again with the module level configuration. Okay, so it's actually okay. So what happens is when you run a Grump install, it actually asks us to configure it. Okay, you can configure it by using the CLI as well, but I have already configured in my project, so I don't need to do that. So no, it's actually working fine with all the PHP versions. Okay, but we can sure check that because I am working PHP 7.0 and above. So what Grump is using? Let me check. Oh, it requires 7.2. So it requires 7.2 and above, and I think everybody is using 7.2 and above for the Magento. Okay. For other stacks like WordPress and Laravel and other frameworks, people have already updated to 7.2 and above, and it's a rare case where people are using PHP 7 and below. Okay. So mine is 7.3, and it's actually working on 7.2 as well. So the next thing is when we install, the next thing is we have to actually restart the terminal. I'm not restarting because it's already installed. So just do a version check. Oh, something got failed. Okay, so let me check. For your cases, like grump will run fine if you run this command, and it will ask you to create a config. So I have created a module for our current demonstration, like in the app code meetup. Okay, then there is a Lucknow. Okay, so it's meetup Lucknow module. Okay, so I have added the required files like composer.json, and there is a module.configuration. Okay, so these files are already there. Okay, so the second thing we need to add the GrumPHP configuration. Okay, this is my sample GrumPHP configuration. Okay, so it's actually available on my Git repo under the module. Okay, this is the same GrumPHP configuration which I'm using on my local. Okay, so the same I'm using here. I've just copied it and actually moved it to my local configuration. Okay, so it's easily in the parameter section and defined to Grum. Okay, so what happened is when I actually updated the GrumPHP, they actually changed the parameter to Grum. Okay, so I will update this into my GitHub repo, and then it will work fine. I think, I suppose. You have requested non-existing parameter root directory. Okay, remove the root directory. A lot of things I have changed, I think. Okay. Git directory, bin directory. Let's remove this. Okay, so these were actually not required variables and working fine in the older Grump repositories, older Grump version. Okay. Yes, sure. I will share. I will share the module as well as I will push the module to our already. I have already created a repository for this. Let me show you. Okay. So that the repository is currently empty, and I will add this code and push it there. Okay. So it's the same module which is here. Let me share. So you can see that it's currently empty and created for only this demonstration. Okay. So I will add and push the code in this live session only. So now my configuration is very fine and working. So what we can do is we can run it. Okay. So as you can see, there are a lot of issues are there. So what happens is when you configure, you can do two things. You can either run the GrumPHP task and actually check what are the errors there, or you can initialize the Git and you can check on the Git commit. Okay. So what I'm doing it. Yes, for module level configuration, you need to add this configuration to every module. Okay, but for project level, for example, you are developing a Magento website that has nothing to do with module level, and you are developing multiple modules for under your like vendor. Okay, in that case, you can initialize the project level configuration, which will be present under Magento root, and every commit under app code or app design will be taken into Grum task. Okay, so every time you do a commit, Grum will actually run all the tasks. Okay, so if you want to look into my tasks, you can see that I have added few, like composer should be like fine and check the dependencies and everything. Okay, after which check the get blacklist keywords. Okay, so these keywords can be like, suppose someone added dive, var dump, printar, exit. Okay, so these are actually not allowed in Magento development and can cause issues sometimes. Okay, also not allowed by Magento quality, Magento coding standard. Okay, so it's better we remove these even if they are present in comments. Okay, object manager, of course, don't use object manager. Inject the dependencies via factories and helper classes or repositories. Use repositories, okay, to create the objects. Now, beside that, I have added PHP CS, and this my default standard is Magento Do standard. Okay, so you need to install the Magento Do standard as well. But if you are using the Magento default configuration, it's actually installed by default. Okay, so there are few things we need to do, and that can be found under my repositories. Okay, okay, so to install the Magento coding standard, composer require -dev and install this by Magento /Magento. But 2.3 Magento have already pre-installed. Okay, so what we just have to do is we have to configure. So we need to do this configure command. Only then the PHP CS will recognize the available standards and include the Magento standard in the available standards. Okay, so this is not done by default, and you can check the Magento coding standard documentation as well. They have mentioned a lot of things there that why they are actually not allowing to initialize, and there is something post install and pre-install hook that can be configured to set these things, but due to some security reasons or something, they are not actually doing it by default. Okay, so they are post install, they are adding these things, and then post update they are again adding this configuration. Okay, so that the PHP CS recognizes Magento coding standard. Okay, so you can check that out from here. Also, if there are two simple lines available in my module, my repository, that you can check. Okay, so we are coming back to again. We have installed Magento 2 coding standard, provided that you can use some other standards also, which are like PSR 12 and PSR 2 and peer, or you can use any other custom standard. Okay, lot of standards are there. For Magento, we follow Magento 2. Okay, and error severity. Okay, so there is a system of severities. Okay, we can define these severities. For example, if you don't want to allow any severity, give it a 4 or 2. Okay, what Magento allows is, but what the severities which are not allowed are severity 10. Okay. Yes. Execute automatically with the composer, right? No, it will run on git commit. Okay. Grump actually listens the git commit command. Okay, so it will run all those changes on git commit. You commit and you push. Okay. Composer check are that what it does is it checks the composition. Okay, so that nothing is invalid in that. Okay, beside the coding that is including PHP, JavaScript, and CSS. Okay, so a lot of actually tasks are available, which I will show you more. That can be added to GrumPHP. I am using PHP CS and PHP Cs Fixer. Okay, so the next thing is I have enabled an auto fixer. Okay, what PHP Cs Fixer does is it's actually tries to fix all those PHP coding standard issues by itself. Okay, by like editing the file on using the script that is available in PHP CS. Okay, and following the Magento coding standard rule set. Okay, so what it does is we have to provide a configuration to PHP CS. PHP Cs Fixer, and what that configuration does it's tell PHP Cs Fixer to run on these files only, because there are certain files and folders that we can skip. For example, if you are running the GrumPHP at project level, then we have to do nothing with the live folder here available, live folder, and we have our dev folder here available. Okay, so these folders can be skipped straightforward. We have to do nothing in that. Okay, so for that we have by default available, there is a configuration available for PHP Cs Fixer, that is .phpcs.dest. Okay, so you can see a lot of rules and files which are excluded here. Okay, so where is excluded, setup vendor is excluded, all those things. So okay, so Magento have already done a lot of things. We just have to use those things. So unit test cases, there is an object manager, right? But I think we are not using object manager in unit test. Okay, we are actually creating mock classes and using those. So I don't understand where is the use of object manager in the unit test cases. And if there is, you can actually restrict the test folder. Okay, so by the configuration, you can actually skip test folder. For multiple Magento projects, if they are running in a single root directory, then you have to install in every Magento. Okay, so it can be either installed at project level or a module level. Okay, so cross projects it doesn't work because it actually listens to Git, or if you want to do the manually, you can add that. Okay, but by default, it's not supported by Magento and the tools that Magento have integrated, like PHP coding, standard fixer, and CS, everything. So by default, it doesn't run for multi projects. Okay, but somebody have developed, and we can check that. Okay, maybe it works, but by default, there is no configuration as such. So again, we have added PHP CS Fixer, provided it with the config. Okay, use cache and everything. Okay, and we can provide it the files we need to actually fix. Okay, so I have added PHP and PHP file. Okay, to actually auto fix them. There are few more rules which are actually not configured in my configuration, that is PHP MD. Okay, so because I didn't get time to actually run, and my PHP storm has already configured it, so I'm not using that. So but there is a way, and it can be done, but you all need to do some research and add it. Okay, but I have added in comments how it can be done. The another thing, that PHP stan, I have also not tested it, but it can also work, and there is a configuration available in Magento site. Okay, in my slides there is a reference. You can check in the reference where all these things are available. Okay, and all the tools which are already integrated into Magento, you can check from the reference, or I can share. Let me. So this is the actually file where Magento have added all the testing tools and their configurations and how to do it. Okay, so you can check that for PHP stan and PHP MD. Okay, so done. This is the configuration. The next thing is do a init the GrumPHP. Okay, run this command and it will tell yes, GrumPHP have initialized. Okay, so we are doing the init. After init, this is, for example, it's a Git repository. Okay, so we can check Git status. So in my Meetup Lucknow module, we have certain files that are yet to be committed. Okay, and few things are not yet stage for change. Okay, and there is a cache file which can be ignored. Okay, so let me add. So after Git initialization, and Grump is already initialized, it's actually listening to Git. Okay, so I can just add all. Okay, so Git commit -m. My first commit. Okay. So what it does is actually runs all the, as soon as I have written the commit command, Grump has detected the pre-commit command and it start sniffing the code. Okay, so I have configured 4 tasks. First, it checks the composer JSON, which is finds is which the Grump finds is correct. Okay, so second thing is it checks for blacklisted keywords, that is printar, die, and console.log and all. And that is, I think, it's also found something in my code. And the second thing is it checks for PHP coding standard, which is also I'm missing. Okay, so the next thing is PHP Cs Fixer. Also, the PHP Fixer fails, and it have resulted into a command that you can run these changes to fix your code. What Grumps is by default configured to not actually fix all those changes by itself, but is give the developer a command or an yes/no feature so that it can, like, I can fix some changes automatically. Do you want me to do? If you do yes, then you can do it. Generally, people don't do because they want to look into the files which are gonna be changed, and if there is something that can be that can go wrong, they don't do it. But I suggest coding standard changes can be automatically fixed, and I didn't find any issue until now, and I have developed a lot of extensions using this PHP CS configuration. Okay, autofix configuration. So let's check what are the issues. So for Git blacklist, we have a red face here. First thing, what GrumPHP does is it gives you a red face and nope if something goes actually wrong. Okay, so it found that helper data have a die. Okay, so let's go to helper data. I have only one file in my module, that is helper data, and yes, there is a die. Okay, so we can remove this die, we can comment it. Let me just try to comment and check. Okay, so yes, still it's not allowed because you have added a comment with a die in it. Okay, and also comments with code is also not like preferred or accepted by few places. Okay, so high quality code do not like allow code in comments. Okay, so let me remove it. Okay, I have removed it. Now let me check. Oh, so now I don't know why it's still there. Okay, let me save the file. I have saved the file now. Check again. Still there. I don't know why it's still there. I'll put data line number 21. Something is still wrong here.
I think we have to run the git add again for that file.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I missed it. I really missed this. Git add. Let me add all. Git add, git my. Yes, correct. Whoever answers this is actually have suggested the right thing. Okay. So thank you. And
there are so many messages in the chat. Same.
yes.
Same.
Okay. Thank you. I'm actually looking into the screen, so I can't look the chat. That's why I missed them. Okay. So now my changes are fixed, but still there's a PHP coding standard issue. Okay. There's the issue like fix all the commit in the following lines. Okay. This fix can be auto fix. So if you want me to run the auto fix, just say yes, and everything will be committed. Okay. So let me do that. So it will ask. I think I have done. Okay, so maybe something will happen. It's actually I have done an enter. It's not going. Okay, no problem. We can just copy this line. Okay, and we can just execute. So what will happen? All changes will be fixed. Okay, so it has or fixed all the changes that can be fixed via PHP Cs Fixer. And those were the changes were very normal. Like in registration.php, there might be some line missing or some space, extra space or anything. That is actually fixed. And now let me correct the GrumPHP command. Oh, you can see all good here. So it's run everything. Okay, all four case test tasks it has done and it's passed. Okay, now we have committed the code and we are ready to push. Okay, so let me get push. So now the code will be available to the Git repository that I have shared. Okay, so you can just copy this code and like start using in your at your module level. Okay, for project level, there is a configuration available in my repository. That can be used, and I have tested it also and it's working fine. Okay, this the latest version changes are missing there. I will add these changes like GrumPHP. I have changed the parameters to GrumPHP and these things can be like updated. Okay, so few more things we can check, like I have removed the name of the composer.json file. Okay, let me add and let me commit. So, okay, so what happened is GrumPHP tried to run the composer test case, okay, composer task, which actually runs and checks the composer JSON is correct, and we have mentioned the name, description, and everything that is required for most of the PHP projects, and it found that okay, composer is valid, but usage makes it a name property is required. Okay, here it is mentioned the name property is required, and that is missing. Okay, so let me add that again. So I have added the name property, and I think I don't need to commit it anytime. Okay, so all good. So beside listening to Git commits, Composer can this GrumPHP can be run directly. Okay, so whenever you want, like you want to run all those checks which are configured. Okay, what happening is okay. Just write GrumPHP and run. So it will run all the cases and give you a green happy face. Okay. So what it help is it actually provide to developer. First, we don't need to run all the cases. Okay, and it will the second thing, it will be enforced on the git commit. Okay, so you will not be able to push any code that is missing quality changes as per Magento coding standard into the git repo. Okay, and nobody will be able to merge. Okay, so we are actually putting a break in the developer level only, so that later nobody has to review the code and say that quality changes are missing and you need to don't use the object manager or these kind of things. Okay, that can be like checked at the starting in the developers level only. Okay, so this was the demonstration. Let me check the messages. Okay, I think a lot of messages are there. Okay, so okay, CBF predefined no has been set. Yes, I am not using the PHP code sniffers sub library, that is PHP CBF. Both the libraries are part of a single package that is provided by Squeeze Labs, I think. Okay, I'm not using that to fix my code. I'm using another package that is available here. That is called PHP Coding Standard Fixer. Okay, that is another library that have more features and can do a lot more than CBF. Okay, so I'm using this PHP Coding Standard Fixer that is available here in Friends of PHP and PHP Cs Fixer. Okay, and one more question is there. Okay, let me check that. Let's say GrumPHP is in one project and multiple developers are working on it, and if GrumPHP gives an error. Okay, so for multiple developers, we are using the Git setup. Okay, so in Git setup, everyone needs to pull the whole project and set up in its local. Okay, I don't think there will be a case when on a single machine multiple developers are working. But there will be a case in different developer machines, same Magento website is being developed. So everyone will like do a commit and push. Okay, so when they could do a commit, the changes which are added in the commit will be like verified with the grump task, and a report is generated in the terminal. Okay, so this case will not come when like multiple developers are there, and same GrumPHP configuration can be used across the fork. Okay, so everybody can use the same config, and but they need to like install these PHP GrumPHP in their systems. And if they like, if somebody wants to add their edit in their like dev dependencies, then it will work for everyone. Okay, so I think that will work fine, and forced to commit and not write anyone to restrict that. Yes, actually it cannot be restricted like somebody remove the GrumPHP and then do a code. Okay, that is the different thing, because if developer don't want to actually follow the quality changes, then the only thing is that someone has to review the code and move it to like merge the branch. Okay, so it will be we can commit from context menu or VCS. I'm not sure, Gopal, but yes, if like if we can commit, if there is a way to add this GrumPHP from at the level of project level, and that cannot be changed by developer, then it's well and good. Okay, for until now I didn't find any way to actually somebody don't remove the GrumPHP. Okay, but it can be done, and people find a lot of changes to skip. But GrumPHP is actually for when for somebody who actually wants to follow things and make his own like job easier. Okay, because before this somebody has to review, and review fail, and again you are correcting the code, then again review fails. So that things can be like conquered with this GrumPHP task automation. Okay, and I have been using, and I think it's working fine. Okay, so workshop is I think done, but there are few things which I would like to share. Like I did face some issues. Okay, so what Grump is first thing what Grump does is it's actually monitors every commit and every change in the code. Okay, so every there can be multiple situations where commit happens. For example, you are like pulling the code from the Git repo server. Okay, and there is a merge happening, and in that merge also the changes are actually run through GrumPHP. So what happens is somebody didn't follow the standard and push the code into production or into repo, master repo, and somebody then taking the pull and updating its local branches, then in that case also it fails and didn't allow to merge. Okay, it's a like it's a issue, or say everybody has to follow the coding standard, or nobody can like do a update also in their local. So that is the issue I faced, and so I have what I need. Like everybody, I set up this GrumPHP on everybody's system, and as a project level or at module level, and I committed those GrumPHP configurations into the Magento module. So it's available in my module code. So anybody who setups and started working needs to actually run the GrumPHP and their local, and then push the code into production. So next thing is setup can be difficult in few cases, and those cases are very like there is a single case in which I was facing very difficulty to set up this. That was Docker setup, and I have been using Docker for multiple projects. Okay, and for multiple Magento websites, and what happens is sometimes the PHP storm configuration or the global PHP which I'm using is actually not recognizing the Grump or PHP CS or the coding standard. Anything can happen like that, and I was not able to successfully configure with Docker. Okay, so that's why I was using the global PHP, and global PHP actually didn't have any conflict with the Docker PHP or anything, so it was running very fine. Okay, so these are dependencies are PHP dependencies, so it can be installed with Composer and placed in a global Composer folder. Okay, so this was the thing that if somebody does and gets it, was able to do it, then you can share with all of us. Okay, or you can commit to my Git repo which I have added. Okay, if there is a way to set up with Docker. Okay, I didn't try this a lot, but in initial try I failed. Okay, so next thing is I have added all the links which I have used in my this presentation. There is PHP Cs Code Sniffer, PHP Coding Standard Fixer, Mess Detector, Stan, Magento DevDocs link for all the testing. Okay, GrumPHP link, GrumPHP task. Okay, GrumPHP have a lot more tasks which I am not using in my current project. But if someone is interested to use them, a lot more things can be done with this task runner. Okay. Beside this, I have added my sample module. Okay. Sample configurations that is present here, and there is an article written by integer_net. It's a German company. Works on Magento 2, and they have added an article I think in 2019. That article will also help you to set up it on your local Magento project. Okay, that is added here. So this was the whole presentation. Okay, so let me show you the task also, which are under and which are already available in the composer. Okay, so these are the tasks. You can see a lot of tasks are available. A whole set of tasks are here. Okay, and a lot of things can be done. Okay, so for different projects which are not Magento, it can different things can be used, and there is a PHP unit also. So PHP unit test cases can also be run via Grum configuration. I'm not using that, so you can try that. Okay, there is a linter also that's similar to PHP CS. Okay, and a lot of things are there. Okay, npm also is there. Okay, make command is also there, so you can check the make command. Okay, gulp runner and get branch name can be restricted so that branches can be have some fixed regular expression, so that branch name can be fixed. Okay, and all more thing code exceptions can be configured. It's a different library that gives us the error in a very formatted way, and gives us a report also. So all those things can be done here. Okay, so what GrumPHP is missing here in this original repository is that they don't have a default configuration for Magento 2. That's why I started developing working with Magento 2, and I created my own configuration. Okay, maybe later it can be added to GrumPHP module, this library itself. Okay, they have a doc for configuration. Okay, you can check that for more info and everything. And beside this, if anybody have any more questions, okay, you can share, or we start our next presentation that is on Magento queues, and we have Atish here ready, and Atish can start this workshop or slide which is on Magento 2 queues, which is also a new in Magento 2. A lot more community developers are not using at its the queues. It was recently made available to community version, but enterprise it was available long ago. And now we have few more things like bulk action and batch operations and everything. So that's a topic which actually improves Magento performance by maybe a lot of Magento performance can be improved. And bulk operation, people were using magme updater and everything. That can be skipped, and now batch operations allow us to bulk update Magento data. Okay, without actually exhausting the server RAM or processor or anything. Okay. So if you have questions, you can just shoot it into the group, or I just allow Nitish to carry on. Atish. So anybody? Okay, so Atish.
Yes.
Hi Atish. So Atish is here. Okay, he's a lot of experience in Magento. He have a lot of experience in Magento, and I think he have done most of the certifications available for Magento. Okay, and he is a tech architect. Okay, he have developed a lot of large-scale Magento projects. Okay, so Atish, I think you can take the screen. Let me switch.
Okay, let
Okay.
me start sharing my screen. So
Yes, sure.
just let me know once you can see my screen.
Okay. We can see you. Okay, ready.
Okay, cool. So let's start. So hi, hello everyone, and thank you, Milind, for giving me this opportunity to speak at the meetup. So today I will be talking a little bit about the basics of Magento queuing, right? And what they are, the basic concept, the terminologies, and so forth. So let's get started. So let me just, yeah. So hi, my name is Atish Goswami. I work as a Adobe Commerce consultant. And today's agenda would be to understand what are message queues, right? So what are these? How are they different from basic cron jobs that we are most aware of or have been using since the Magento 1 days, right? So there are two systems in which Magento offers this queuing solution. One is using our very own MySQL database for queuing purposes, which Magento recommends if you have a very basic queuing implementation where you just have one queue over, let's say, 10 or 20 messages getting flowing through the system, then you can use the MySQL database for queuing. But if you have a very large scale implementation in which you have tens of thousands of messages coming in and out, then it's not really recommended because it creates unnecessary load on the very same database the application is also using for, let's say, serving the storefront and things like that. So for that, it recommends a different solution called Rabbitmq. So we are going to look into details of all of these solutions and how to set it up and things like that. But this is our basic agenda. Then we are going to see how to publish a message, and then finally how to consume a message as well. So for the next time we would, so these are like the basic things that we are covering this time, but for the next time we'll keep the advanced topics which we will not be able to cover because of the time constraint. So one of which would be like batch consumptions, asynchronous APIs, and like running the consumer using supervisor. So I'll get into all the details of what is a consumer is, what a message is, what a queue is, getting into real life examples so that you can also map your brains around these new terminologies. Okay. So why use message queues? So before message queues, Magento had a synchronous solution which we all use is cron. So what we used to do is like anything that we do want to do it asynchronously or in the background. What we used to do is like create a table in MySQL and then put all the information there. And then there is a cron job running every, let's say, 5 minutes or 20 minutes, right? And it picks up that information and does some kind of processing on top of that information provided. But thing is that there can be a little bit of issues with those kind of things where like the cron is not really that performant. So as we will see like how scalable message queuing can become. And the other part is that it's not that real time. So basically crons, we actually have a timer on it or a scheduled job which actually runs, let's say, every 5 seconds or 10 seconds. It's not near real time. So message queues is something that we'll see in the demonstration is very real time, and it actually works on the pub sub pattern, which is like you publish a message, it subscribes to that message and fetches that information near real time. So in cron, it's more like it's not a pub sub pattern. It's like you run it every few seconds to see like if there is any message there, and you try to fetch it out, right? So this actually helps. And the second thing is that if you have a very decoupled system in which like there are many entities interacting, so let's say you have a Magento application and then you have a separate ERP in which the information needs to flow into. So message queues can be really helpful where you can just publish the information onto a server, let's say Rabbitmq, and then your ERP can pick it up when and to pick that information and then do some processing with it, right? So before we jump into all of this, let's look into some terminologies of the message queue system. So one of which is known as the producer, publisher, or sometimes known as a broadcaster. So what is this? So basically this is your application, which is the source of generating all these messages, right? So basically Magento would be our publisher. So we'll like compile some kind of a message, and this application is supposed to publish it to a system, be it, let's say, our the MySQL database that we might be using, or let's say the Rabbitmq that we might be using, right? So the next part is the exchange. So exchange is something like a division in which it takes care of routing all these informations to a specific queue, and depending on the message and particular headers or informations that are passed on, it actually decides which queue this should land into. If you're not getting this, don't worry, we'll take up some real life example to get these terminologies wrapped around your head. Next, we have queue. Queue is nothing but something like we call a line, right? In which we have people in the line, same way we have messages in a line. And they are arranged in sequential order. And when the consumer is like running in the background, it actually picks up messages one by one as we go forward. Next, we have messages. Of course, messages are the thing or the information that we want to pass along to the system that is consuming all those messages, and depending on the information that has been provided in the messages, the consumer does the task. So and finally, of course, we have the consumer or the subscriber, which is responsible for pulling the messages and doing the task. Right, so this is how it looks like. So we have a message that is generated from our application, right, and it is pushed or published, and this terminology is known as enqueue, which means that you are pushing some information onto a queue, and then this queue is actually filled up with all of these messages, and then a consumer at the very bottom, if you can see, is actually responsible for dequeuing it. So which means that it is picking up one message at a time and like doing some task with it, or taking up that information and doing some relevant task with it. So another diagram, pretty much the same thing, which includes the two new things, that is the producer and the consumer. This in the very middle remains pretty much the same, but the producer here is our Magento application, which produces the message, puts it into the queue, and consumer again for our demos and purposes is the Magento application itself, but this application can be something different. So let's say that you have an ERP system which also can have a consumer which is responsible for picking up all the order information that was passed on using the messages, and then creating those orders into the ERP. You can have like a separate email marketing system in which like we are pushing on all the messages with the emails that needs to be shooted out to the customers, and then the marketing system actually picks it up one by one and shoots it out to the customers saying that this promotion is going on. So consumer again can be a very independent entity. It doesn't have to be like your Magento application itself. It can be any XYZ application which is connected to your queue and picking up information to do some processing. So let's take some real life examples. So it can be really difficult if you are doing this for the first time. So let's take an example of a bank. So whenever you go to a bank, there is always like a counter in which a person is sitting behind of it. So for our intents and purposes, this is supposed to be the consumer, right? And then there is a line, right? And each line, we have people standing in front of them, right? So there can be, so for this example in this diagram, as you can see, there is a bank which one single counter, and people have a single line in which they are standing in, right? So now the thing is that if you have a single line, and each of the person actually can be considered as a message, because each person will tell the teller what to do, right? So let's say the first person here is to came here to update the passbook, right? The second person is actually here to, let's say, take a loan from the bank, and the third person is actually here to like take or create a new account in the bank, right? So here what you can see is that the first person's information can be processed rather quickly because it's just telling the teller that, okay, my passbook needs to be updated. I just print it out and then the person is on its way. But the second person here is for a loan, right? And the loan application, the documents, the processing can take a while, for which the third person right behind him is sitting idle till the person in front of it, the process is done, right? So this is not a very ideal scenario for your application or for this bank. So if you have one single queue and you are putting in different information like different messages with very different intents, so what happens is that the teller is overwhelmed and people are sitting idle for their turn to come. So to counter this, what you might have seen in different banks is that every bank actually has multiple counters depending on your scenario of what you want to do, right? So here, as you can see, there are three different queues and three different counters as well, right? So the first counter can be all of the people who are actually here to open a new account in the bank, right? The second counter can actually be for the people who are here to link the Aadhaar card, and the third are the people who might be just to like update their passbook, right? So here, as you can see, there are two tellers who are sitting behind, who are again our consumers, right? And each of the people can be considered as a message because these people are telling the consumer what to do or telling the teller what to do, right? So as you can see here, if let's say this person is taking a whole lot of time because let's say and this is for like creating an account, right? The other two lines are getting consumed as well with different consumers, and a lot of like processing is going on simultaneously, right? So this is something that message queue also offers, that you can have multiple queues, each with their own intents, and each of these queues can be actually connected to a separate consumer, right? And these consumers can actually pick them up simultaneously, parallelly, right? And for that purpose, your information gets consumed a lot more quickly, and no like messages are staying in idle, right? So this is how it looks like once we see the demos, it might look a little bit better. I might not be able to explain it quite very well right now, but once I show you a little bit of a demo, you might get a little bit of more information about this. And finally, where the message queues excel is something called parallel processing. So again, going to our real world example, let's say you might have heard that a lot of people had to rush to the bank because of the demonetization that our humble Prime Minister actually did, right? So you might have seen that in the banks, once you reach the bank, you will see that there are multiple counters doing the same thing because the amount of request for that particular operation has increased, right? So here example is that there is still a single purpose or a single queue in which people are here to submit their $500 or $1,000 1,000 rupee notes, right? And there are three counters simultaneously doing the same jobs. So as you might have like seen, if the banking is efficient, these queues or the people in the queues get to do their process or do their submission rather quickly. So here, as you can see, there are simultaneous operations actually happening as well. So how does this all real life example map to our message queues? We'll see right now. Okay, so let's move on to the basic implementation, which is using MySQL or our MySQL database for our message queuing system. So MySQL database, which is our Magento's MySQL database, actually has a couple of tables like the queue table, the queue underscore message, and the queue message underscore status tables, right? So these tables are responsible for handling all this queuing infrastructure, right? And in a very bold notice right below is that if you have this queuing implementation, which is of very basic traffic, like you have just 50 or 20 messages coming in throughout the day, use MySQL. It does perform pretty well under less load. But if you have a very major operation where there are tens of thousands of messages coming in a day, the queries on the database will increase, as you will see, and this can actually hamper your overall application performance. So for that, Rabbitmq is recommended. Okay. So prerequisites, how do we set this up? Fortunately, there is nothing to do. So already the env.php of our Magento is connected to the database. So there is no new connection or new setting that needs to be put on, right? So this is something that is very quick to set up for our MySQL at least. So what are the tables that we have? So we have these 4 tables which are responsible for handling the message queues. We'll see the demo and it will make more sense, right? So first is the queue table, which is responsible for storing all the queue information. So we'll have, like as you saw in the real life examples, right? We have lines, right? So that is actually known as queues. So each queue will have its own name, right? The second one is queue underscore message. So whenever we will be publishing a message, it will be actually mapped to a particular queue and the message will go inside that queue. The third is the queue message status. So here what happens is that every time a new message is put in, it actually comes with a status saying that it's a new. So you'll see the number 2 in front of it. I'll show you this in the demo. And then as and along the message goes onto the processing state, it will actually go from 3 to 4 rather quickly. And let's say if actually it failed, it will go on to status number 6, where you will see that some error happened, right? And finally, the queue underscore lock. So here, this table actually helps with parallel processing. So basically, if you have like multiple consumers running on your background, every time a consumer picks up a message, it will actually lock this message in this table, so that the other consumers which are running in parallel don't actually pick up the same message and do the processing, which already some consumer has picked up, right? So this comes in really handy. Next, we have outdated consumer handling. So what happens is that, as you'll see in the demo, that we have a consumer running, which actually runs in a while loop for like eternity, right? Unless and until you stop it. So there are a lot of what you can say, things happening in the background in your application, in which like you're changing settings or things like that, and this code that is running in the background is actually loaded up in the memory, and it does not actually communicates with the actual file structure of Magento to like updates its settings if like there any setting has happened, right? So for that, what happens is that Magento maintains a table called queue poison pill. What it does is actually has some triggers in the database or the application, as you'll see here. So every time you try to update any store settings or website settings or configuration settings, what it does in an after save is that it runs this piece of code. What it does is actually updates the version ID. Here we'll see the demo. So what happens is that whenever a consumer is triggered or started, it actually has a version ID in its memory. And whenever every message is consumed one by one in a consumer, so what it does is actually checks this version number every time. So if any time this version number has changed in the database, it actually kills itself using an exit, right? And then again, a cron is actually responsible to re-trigger the consumer, and it is actually loading the updated set of configurations. So enough talk, let's jump into how we would like to implement this, right? So for that, we just need to set up a module. The setting up a module is pretty basic, but these 4 like XMLs are very much needed to like set up your queues. So let's get started on that. So I hope everybody can see my editor. So here what you need to do is, as you can see, I have registered a module. Let me just close all of this. Looks very busy. Okay. So as you can see here, I have registered my module. It's pretty basic. So you have registration.php module XML. So these are like a very basic amount of files that you need to do to register your module. Once the registration is done, the newest XML that you'll see is this. So here you'll see that I have created a communication.xml. So the communication.xml is the one where we tell that there is a new topic that needs to be registered. So what's the difference between a topic and a queue? I think somebody's mic is on. Can you go on mute? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Atish, can you please increase the font size?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. Okay. Let me go 18. Line. Is this better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Cool. So here, as you can see, I have registered a topic. Topic is something that can be used for an exchange. So again, going back to our real life example. So here, right, when we are going or entering into a bank, right, so you are always greeted by the watchman, right, and the watchman actually asks, bhai aapko kya karna hai, or what would you like to do, what's the purpose for your visit for this bank, right? So you say that I have come here to like link my Aadhaar card to my bank account. So the watchman actually tells you like go to counter number 1 or go to counter number 2, right? So that's the purpose of an exchange. So the part that I discussed, I think here, right? So this is the person or the middleman which is actually responsible for identifying your message, right, or your purpose, and then finding you the right queue where this message should be landed, right? So that's what we are trying to do here. So first we are trying to register a topic. So topic is something that is actually used to map to various queues, which we'll see in the further demos as well, right? So here I have a very basic topic name, which is Meetup Demo DB. So this is a DB demo, right? The request is a string. So this is actually the schema in which the message should be. So it should be a string, and you can have like complex objects as well put in here as well, which we'll see in the demo as well. And then finally, we have other things as well. So if I go here, you'll see that there is a response as well and a schema as well, right? So schema is actually used when you are creating asynchronous bulk APIs, which we are not covering in this demo, unfortunately, because of the time restriction. But if you are creating such kind of an asynchronous APIs, you actually need to declare a schema. And then finally response. A response is something that is utilized when you are using synchronous messages. So here for our demo, we are using asynchronous messages, in which like we push in the message and then don't get a response right away, right? So but if you are using a synchronous message, the protocol is known as RPC, which we again are not covering, which actually helps you get a message back from the other system. So this is a little bit of an advanced topic which I'm not covering, but just to give you an overview of what these two other nodes are responsible for, right? So here I have defined the request as string, right? And then I have told that this topic is not synchronous, which means that it is asynchronous, right? So once this is determined, I move on to the next file, which is queue_topology, right? So here I can create my own exchange, right? Or I can like use Magento's default exchange as well. So for Magento, it is like just Magento-DB. So that's the default exchange. But if you don't want to use that, you can create your own exchange. So exchange here is actually a bunch of rule sets that you can implement right here, as you can see. So what I'm telling in the rule set here is that a binding needs to be created. So this ID is supposed to be a unique one. So it can be anything, doesn't matter. So just has to be unique, right? So here what I'm telling is that whenever a message is published to this topic, it should actually, the destination should be a queue, and the destination queue name is this. So what happens, why do we need this topic? So let's take a real life example. Let's say I run a marketing company, right? And I get a request from my client to publish an ad, right? So ad can be for different channels as well. So it can be a physical ad where a hoarding needs to be printed out and then placed onto, let's say, some kind of a banner somewhere, right? It can be published onto Facebook ads, it can be published onto Google ads and things like that, right? And then it can also go on to TVs and other media publications for the same intents and purposes, right? So I can have a single topic, right? And then I can also have like multiple bindings to the same topic and putting it into different queues. So the first queue can be, let's say, the Facebook ad queue. The second one can be, let's say, the Google ad queue. The third one can be the TV queue, and the fourth one can be, let's say, the physical ad queue, right? So I can just do one publish and it actually maps it to all these four queues simultaneously. So what it does is that using this one single publish command, I'm actually triggering all these media different channel to pick up my ad and then publish it accordingly, right? So for our intents and purposes of the demo, it is a one-on-one binding, which means that this topic, whenever I'm trying to publish to this topic, it actually delivers to this particular destination, which is the queue name, right? So here the type is topic. So if you type anything else, it actually doesn't take, it will give you an error. So you can only have it as topic. So exchange, there are different types as well. So when we reach on to Rabbitmq, we'll see that we have different types of exchanges. When one is topic, another is fan out, one is direct, right? But Magento doesn't support all of this. It only supports topic exchanges, right? And the third one here is the connection. So connection, for now, our demo is going to be on the MySQL database. So the connection name is DB. But if once we move on to Rabbitmq, this connection name will change to AMQP. Sorry, P. So what this connection tells is that whenever like it is trying to push a message or publish a message, where this like message should land into what system, right? So if I go on to my command line and then do a cat on my env.php. So here you'll see that the name is AMQP. So this name is actually supposed to be put in here. So DB, of course, DB is right here, right? So it knows that this connection needs to be picked up from here, and then we have AMQP. So AMQP can be put here, and you can actually have multiple like queue systems attached to my Magento as well. So let's say you have one for Rabbitmq, then you have another queuing system for SQS and things like that. So you can have different connection names, and of course you have to do some custom like module development to make those connections work, right? But you can have like multiple connections here, and this will actually help the publisher understand where this message should land into, right? So once the message is pushed out into the system, the exchange actually picks it up, finds the binding, and then pushes it to a particular queue, right? So this is the second term. The third one is this. This is the publisher setting, where if I say that this is my topic, which is again the same topic name right here, right? And where is the connection? It is to the DB, and then you have determined the exchange. So exchange name is nothing but the same exchange name that I have declared here. So what happens is that whenever I publish some message to this topic, it knows the connection, it knows the exchange, then it picks up the configuration from this exchange, tries to identify, okay, this is the topic that the person published to, and this is the queue it should land into, right? And then finally we have the consumer. So the consumer is the one that is actually picking up the messages, which is like pulling it down to it. So basically we have put in a queue name. So I'll tell you where this like determines. So name can be anything. Then you have the queue name, right? So queue name is nothing but the destination where the like the message is going to reach, right? And then again you have the connection name. So connection is DB, so the consumer knows that the MySQL database needs to be connected, and then I need to query this table to get the information. Unfortunately, there is a new node, XML node called max messages. Unfortunately, this doesn't work. So I'll tell you what max messages are once we reach onto the part where we have invoked our consumer and trying to consume some messages. Then we have our consumer instance. So consumer instance is nothing but a class which actually is responsible for handling all the operations that needs to happen in order for a message to actually pick it up, right? So and finally we have the handler. So handler is nothing but our logic, or like the consumer logic to do, like once it receives the message, what to do here. So I'm doing nothing, I'm just echoing it out, right? So it's particularly doing nothing, right? So enough with the XMLs. I know this is very confusing, but trust me, hang on, and I'll try to show you a little bit of a demo, and hopefully this actually clears out a little bit of your doubts, right? So let me minimize this presentation and show you the tables responsible. So in the presentation, if I go a little bit off here, so I told you about all of these 4 tables, right? So we have the queue table opened here, we have the messages table open here, I cleaned it out, we have the message status table opened here, and I don't think I have the log table open, so I'll just open it up really quickly and open here, right? So now we have actually put in all the XMLs that Magento needs to know to actually register these queues, right? So what needs to happen next is our favorite command, the setup upgrade command, right? So this command is actually responsible for doing a lot of things, like running your database migrations and things like that. But it is also responsible for reading all of these XMLs, right? These queue XMLs. And once I run this command, what you'll see is that our relatively empty table, which is our queue table, will actually get populated with the queues that actually it parses through the entire code base and tries to identify all the queues that are present or needs to be registered in our application, right? So let's wait for this to complete, which actually takes a little bit longer than usual. Whenever I'm trying to give a demo, it's actually much slower. It notes when people are showing a demo of Magento. Anyways, so once I refresh, you'll see that there are a lot of queues that got registered, and our queue is at the end. So you might be wondering where the hell these came out of, right? So these are all core queues, right? Magento actually internally also uses a lot of message queuing, right? And it actually is actually using it internally. So one of the examples would be this one. So product action attribute, right? So if I go to my backend, I am not sure if I registered my backend correctly. So this is a very quick example. I maybe right, and if I press enter, so let it load because like I just cleared my cache and it will take a while to load. So what it does here is that it has a queue for product action attribute. For what is this? So if you go on to your product grid, there is a mass action where you can update a couple of products from the grid itself, right? So what used to happen before was that there were people were selecting a lot of products, right, and used to submit it, and Magento actually used to process all of that information in the foreground. Foreground is that in that request itself, and most of the time the customers used to complain about, let's say, the thing is timing out, right? So what now it does is actually puts all that information onto a queue, and there is a consumer running in the background which actually picks up all those information and then updates the product, right? So here, as you can see, last one is our meetup demo queue. So where this name came from, it comes from, I think this is the one where we register our destination and it knows the queue name, right? So we have registered our queue. Messages are still empty, which we'll publish in a moment, right? And I think we can. Okay, cool. So now the queue is registered. Now what we'll try to do is publish a message. So to publish a message, I have created a very simple test file which actually runs a particular line of code, right? Again, object manager, I'm using it here. This is a very sandbox kind of a playground kind of a file. I am not encouraging anybody of you to use object manager. This is all intents and purposes for the demo only, right? So what I did here is I took an instance of this particular what you can say publisher. So this publisher is actually responsible for publishing the message. So this is the class. So it's Magento framework message queue publish interface, right? So once you have the publisher initialized, it actually has a class, a method called publish, in which it takes two arguments, one of which is your topic name. So your topic name is nothing but whatever you have declared right here, right? So here it's meetup db demo, right? Demo db, right? And then our data is a string. So again, going back here, I have registered the data type as string. So only string is allowed to be passed. If I try to pass in an object or an array, then errors will be thrown out saying that the data type does not match, okay? So I hope everybody is following up till this point. I know like this is a very new concept to people who have not yet worked with message queues, but it gets a little bit easy as you use it more and more, right? So now what I'll do is I'll just run this file. So what will happen is that a topic and a message would be published, right? So if I go back here, I have my URL ready. I'll just refresh it. So here it shows done, right? So here nothing changes because the queues are already registered. But if I refresh it here, I'll actually see that the topic name of meetup db demo, demo db, and a message body of sample data has been published, right? If I go onto the message status and nothing has happened, if I go here, should have. Anyways, so if I go here, lock, nothing has happened yet. So now let's move on to our consumer. So to figure out the consumers or what are the list of consumers available, this is the Magento command. Let me just zoom it a little bit. I think this should be enough, right? So here I am running the command php bin Magento queue consumer list, right? And press enter. So what it does is actually parses through all the XMLs, which is your queue consumers, this file, right? And then lists out the name of this node right here. So as you can see, I have a meetup demo consumer right here, and it actually has other consumers as well. So if you remember the first one, the first queue that I was explaining about, this is the consumer. So if I run this consumer, it will actually do the consumption for that part, right? So here we have our consumer ready as well, which is meetup demo consumer, right? Which is right here. So it is actually mapped to our meetup demo queue, right? So the topology actually tells that this is the topic, but this is where the queue is, right? And this consumer is actually responsible for picking that information from this particular queue and show it. So our consumer or the demo consumer is doing nothing but just picking whatever message is coming its way. It is just echoing it out, right? So let's run it really quickly. So if I say start, I messed up my history. Anyways, no problem. So the command would be queue consumer start, and then we have the meetup demo consumer. So I'll just put the name in front of it, right? And press enter. So what it does is actually run in a while loop, right? And like tries to picks up those messages from your what you can say, your table, right? And if I go back right here, something is not right. Okay. I think I might have messed up my demo.
I think the topology got updated, the XML, topology.xml. The connection is AMQP. Can
Okay,
you
sorry. I think I messed it up once again. Okay, thank you so much for that. So topology is updated. Going back, there's also DB, there's also DB, there's also DB, good. I'll just push this. So lesson learned here is that don't mess with the XMLs, right? And I'll just have to clear out my cache because of course I updated my XMLs, right? And I'll just run setup upgrade once more. It's not really needed, but just for a safety check, I'll put this on. So once that is done, I'll again try to publish a new message, right? In the meanwhile, this is running, right? I'll just run a truncate command so that all the queues are destroyed, right? And the setup upgrade command actually regenerates all the queues with the latest configuration settings. So again, running setup upgrade, it will take a little bit of time. Sometimes it is merciful and runs quite quickly. Sometimes it's not. So let's wait for this to complete. It's done. Done. Going back, we have all the queues. Messages are removed. I refresh this a couple of times. So again, I cleared out the cache. That's why the first publishing is taking a little bit longer, which is always the case once you nuke the Magento cache. So once this gets done, we should see a new message pop up in the table. But the last time which was not happening is this one. So the message queue is a message status table is supposed to actually have an entry of the message that actually gets entered in the message underscore queue, right? So this was not happening before because of our topology issue. Thank you for correcting me there, or else I would have taken a little bit of time to debug. Thank you so much. And I think the publishing is done. I'll just refresh my message. I have two messages right here. I'll refresh this. This is the one that was missing last time. So here you'll see that the queue ID is nothing but the ID from this table right here. So if I click on this, right click new. So this is what the queue will look like, right? So now if I go back, okay. So this is the queue message name, right? So this is mapped. Then you have the message ID, which is nothing but the ID from this queue underscore message table. You have the last updated date, and then you have the statuses. So if I go back to my presentation here, you'll see that 2 represents new, right? So it's a new message. Once the consumer picks it up, it goes to 3 and then finally to 4. So let's run our consumer one more time. And enter. And here you'll see it echoed out 2 separate strings, right? And if I go back and refresh the statuses, it actually goes to 4, which means that the messages actually has been picked up, right? So this is done, and here if I refresh, these two lock implementation has also been done. So what this does is actually does a checksum of your messages and locks it out, right? So that like if I try to run once more, even if I update these statuses, it will actually not allow you because there is a lock in place, right? So these are all done like custom handled in MySQL, because MySQL is like not out of the box a messaging service engine or a message providing engine, right? So these are all custom handled. Once we move on to Rabbitmq, it actually does it all internally and we don't have to handle all these kind of things, right? So I hope I was able to give you a little bit of a demo on like how the message queues work. So let's look into something else as well, are the arguments here. So if I put help in front of it, it will actually give you these really nice options that you can put in. So one of which I'll try to show. So this is the first command that we run, is that using our consumer, right? Then the second is your max messages, right? So max messages, what is that? So let's call invoke. So internally what happens is that this is where you end up when the code is running, right? So it is like a do while loop, as I was explaining before, right? And it actually has a for loop in front of it as well. So here, if you have put in max messages, let's say 1, right? So once that all is done and it actually crosses that part, it actually goes out of this loop and your queue ends, right? Or your consumer ends. So let me give you a quick example. So let's say that I publish another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 messages, right? And if I refresh them, I get another 6 messages. And if I refresh the statuses, these are all 2s, which means that these have yet to be consumed, right? Now, if I go again, just to copy that argument, I don't want to like do any spelling mistakes. So I'll just copy this, right? So, and put it here and put 1 in front of it. So what this means, that maximum amount of messages this consumer can consume is just 1, right? So what happens is that once it actually has consumed or picked up that messages, it will die. So before, if you might have noticed, I'm not sure if I was able to give that demo, before it actually used to run in an infinite loop or a while loop and doesn't exit until and unless I press like Control C. So let's see what happens. So if I press max message 1, so you will see that it will actually give me the output right here, which means that the logic inside my demo consumer was actually executed, right? And then it actually gave me back my prompt as well. So here I can do anything I want. So what this means, that actually the consumer has completed the max message limit and it will die itself. The other thing I wanted to show is the poison pill. So this was what I was trying to explain earlier, right? So what it will try to do is, whenever it's trying to invoke, right, the consumer for the first time, it will actually put the current poison version in its database, right? So let me just go back and open up the table poison, right? So this is what the table looks like. So here you will have the version number, right? And every time any of the triggers that I showed, right? So if I go down right here, any of these things change, right? So what happens is that this version number actually changes right here. Now, going back to the code to understand, so what it is doing is actually loading this version number onto its memory and then going into a while loop right here, right? And every time a message consumption is done, it actually checks, like this is where the logic is actually executed, right? So this is the callback, which is actually firing my this logic, right? So but before that, it will actually check with the latest version. So this is what the consumer has, and it will actually run a database query to get the latest version ID, right? The problem here is that Magento is still under the implementation. So here you'll see that it actually goes into, I think, here you'll see that it's a stub implementation right now, which means that the internal cache is not getting utilized. So what it is doing as of now is running a query every time onto the database, which is here, right? And trying to fetch out the version. So if you want that this query doesn't should not fire every time, it should only fire whenever the cache is updated, right? And rest of the time it should just fetch it from the cache. You actually need to implement it yourself. It is actually in a to-do, and this is the task ID that they have put in, but not sure when this implementation will be complete. But this actually adds up a little bit of more load onto your database, and if you don't want this implementation, you can do your own by overriding this invoke principle, right? So going back to the code, so here if the version check fails, means that the version actually has been updated, right? It will actually kill itself, right? So we can try it in a demo, but I think I should move on to Rabbitmq because the time is running out. So basically, if you want to try it out on your own, what you can do is publish a bunch of messages, right? And then go into the database and change it to a particular message that you want, and you'll see that the consumer automatically kills itself, right? So moving on to the other arguments that I wanted to show. The second one is the batch size. So this batch size, unfortunately, we are not going to cover. Just going to give you a little bit of info on this. So there are bulk operations. So bulk operations means that we can actually pick out messages not one at a time in batches. So let's say we have 10,000 messages coming in. So if you pick them one at a time, it will take a lot of time. So what Magento gives you the opportunity is having a batch size as well, right? So here batch size means that it will pick up 500 messages at a time and then process it internally and then go on to the next 500 batch. So what this helps is that it actually eliminates multiple connections. So if you are going like one by one, it will connect to, let's say, the MySQL database or Rabbitmq, pick one message, consume it, again connect it, pick one message, consume it, and things like that happen, right? But if you want to reduce the connection time, you can actually consume it in batches. So let's say if I have a batch size of 500, so and I have 1,000 messages in my queue, so I'll do connections only 2 times, taking in 500 at a time, right? But if I don't have this batch size and I'm doing it one at a time, it actually will do multiple connections, at least for MySQL. Rabbitmq, it's a little bit different, like the connection is open as long as the messages are flowing in. So it's a different kind of protocol handled there, but at least for MySQL, it would be very, very wrong. The next part I wanted to cover is your area code. Right, so area code is something needed in your consumer once your logic is dependent on the area code. So what does this mean? So basically, let's say that you have a consumer, right, in your Magento, which is actually responsible for firing an email, right? So email templates, email designs, and these kind of stuff are actually pretty much bound to the front end. So if you don't set an area code in your consumer, it will not know what area it is running in, and it will actually fail to fire an email. So what you need to do is actually tell it that it's the front end. It will actually load the front end scope, and it will actually get access to all the pub media assets to generate a beautiful email template and then fire it to the customer, right? So there are a lot of logics which might require, let's say, admin HTML as well. So let's say that my consumer is not responsible for firing an alert to the customer. Let's say it's firing an alert to, let's say, the admin, where it will pick up some new changes that happen to your product and then compile it all to an email and then send it out. So again, the design that we have put in is actually bound to the theme, right? Which is again bound to a area, which is our admin HTML. If we don't have this area code set, then again the email firing might not work or will not work. And then finally, the third one that I wanted to explain is single thread. So if I go back to my example, right? So I told you that there is a way where a single queue can be actually consumed by multiple consumers as well. So here in which the demo I showed, I just initiated one single consumer, right? But if I want, I can actually have several different consumer running in parallel, picking up messages simultaneously, and then the queue is emptied much faster, right? So but for some consumers, those can't run in parallel. So basically if like there is an operation which is dependent on one another, and if you are trying to run things in parallel, a lot can go wrong. So it's very important to understand if it can be handled in parallel or not. So if it is not, you can actually bind your consumer with a single thread. So what this means is that, let's say I have a consumer running, right, with a single thread argument, and I press enter, right, and I go on here. This is my second terminal, right? So this is my first terminal which is actually running this consumer. If I try to rerun this consumer or a second instance of this consumer and press enter, what will actually happen, it will actually throw an error saying that the consumer with the same name is already running. So what it does is actually runs a command, sorry, yeah, I'm in a container. So what it does is actually runs a command for this consumers that or the processes that are running in background, and try to search the consumer name with my consumer name, which is this one, right? And if it is already running in the background and it has an argument of a single thread, then it will not allow you to run any more instances of the same consumer. But if I stop this, I remove the single thread, right? So let me just add a little bit of sleep here, so that like both the consumers will actually have the opportunity to consume the messages simultaneously, right? So I'll add a sleep of 5000. I think this is 5 seconds if I'm not wrong, and I'll have a little bit of messages published as well. So here, if I'm not wrong, all the messages got consumed. Yes, all of them have. So let's publish a little bit more. So I'll do a couple more. So here will be new messages. Yes, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 new messages. So now I'll just move it here. Echo out PHP end of line, so that it looks a little bit better on the output. Okay, and then once the echo is done, what happened? Once the echo has done, it will actually sleep for 5000 seconds. Sorry, 5000 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds, and then pick on the new consumer. So the reason of doing this is because I want both the consumer to pick things simultaneously, and hope this works. Let's see if it works or not. So now if I run this consumer right here, and then run this one right here, so you'll see that it will actually pick sample data. Here also it has picked up a sample data. So now what is happening is that two consumers are working in parallel to actually pick messages from the queue, and doing the entire operation twice as fast. So let's say that this 4 consumers took like 1 second each. Like if one consumer is running, it will take 4 seconds to complete. But if I have like 2 consumers running, it will take half the time. So I hope I was able to give you a little bit of a demo on this part as well, which is your the consumers, how you can run them in parallel, right? Now let me just stop them right here. Stop it right here. Okay, I think it were able to consume. So here, as you can see, it go out into 3. So what does 3 mean? So 3 means, if I go back here, is it in progress? 3 means in progress. So now, as we had put in sleep right here, so it actually didn't get the time to complete the entire process function. and that's why the status update was not completed, right? So this actually you can see the logic. If I go, where should I go? Where should I go? I should go into consumer, right here. If I call this, so this is actually the transaction callback, which is actually responsible for picking up your messages and then firing all of the logic that you have put in, and then acknowledge. So acknowledge means that of course the message has been properly consumed and the status has to be updated, right? So this is what happens if exceptions are thrown. Multiple things also happen. Unfortunately, Magento MySQL doesn't have a feature of requeuing. So requeuing means that if a message is due to some error, so let's say that your consumer is responsible for picking a message, and then depending on that message, it actually does an API call to let's say a third-party service. For XYZ reason, the API was down and it threw an error saying that the curl request timed out. So you can throw an exception, right, and it will actually requeue the message for later on. But unfortunately here, as you can see, the requeue is marked as false. So what you can do is actually build your own class, which is like not using, like instead of passing in a core class, you can actually pass your own class, and then you can write your own logic of like requeuing and how you want it to be. So let's say an exception is thrown or a particular kind of an exception is thrown, then only you would like to requeue it, or else you just want to reject it, right? So this also like flexibility is also there, right? Now going on, so I think I have covered my MySQL part. So let's move on to Rabbitmq really quickly. So I'll keep this very brief, right? Because I think I have only 15 more minutes. So basically the most of the things that you need to know here is that Rabbitmq uses an AMQP protocol. So AMQP actually stands for Advanced Message Queuing Protocol, and the version number here is 0.9.1, right? So this is very, very important to note, because I actually faced an issue with one of my friends. So she was actually working on a project where they actually wanted to integrate ActiveMQ instead of Rabbitmq. So ActiveMQ is another like queuing solution, right? And what happened is that we read the documentation and it told that it actually supports AMQP protocol as well, right? So AMQP protocol was supported. We got like really happy because we didn't have to customize anything. We just have to provide the configuration and it should just work, right? But the problem was ActiveMQ actually supports AMQP protocol, which is 1 point some version, right? And then we realized that 0.91 is the one that we are using, which is like supported by Rabbitmq, even though both the protocols are like the same, right? But the version numbers are different, so the specifications kind of change, right? So we actually ended up using Stomp protocol, which is another type of a protocol for queuing to actually implement all that solution. So this version number is really important. So anytime somebody comes in saying that, okay, I have this XYZ queuing solution, right? It also uses AMQP. You can just like switch it, right, with Rabbitmq to that XYZ solution. You just have to check with the version as well, right? Now, prerequisites. So unfortunately, our environments don't actually come with Rabbitmq out of the box, right? So we have to install it, and then we actually have to update our env.php as well. So there are a couple of ways that you can go through it. One is a basic install where you use the Linux package manager on your like Vagrant box or your host machine. If you're lucky enough to using like Ubuntu or like a Linux solution, you can install it right away. Then we have a Docker solution in which like you can use a container. And then finally, if you don't want the hassle of installing Rabbitmq, it actually has a very good solution, a service solution or a SaaS solution or a cloud-based solution in which like you don't have to set up anything. You just register an account. It will give you the credential. You just set it up onto your env.php and you're ready to go, right? So the first part, basic install, it's pretty self-explanatory. So basically I'm giving you an example here to how to install it on a CentOS device. But again, like if you are using Ubuntu, you can just do a quick Google search and you'll get the results. So here what we are doing is updating our packages, registering Rabbitmq package manager, and then installing the Rabbitmq server, and finally we also need a Rabbitmq management plugin, which actually gives you this nice little UI. I'll walk you through this UI in a while. So this is there. Then you have a container setup. So if you are using Docker containers, you can just pull in the Docker image for the Rabbitmq and then just run it detached, right? Or if you are using like Docker Compose, you can just add this configuration onto your Docker Compose file and re-up your Docker Compose, and it will actually instantiate this container as well. And finally, we have our Rabbitmq as a service solution. So it's actually a paid solution, but here at the bottom, I'm not sure if how visible it is. It's actually free. So if I go here onto the site and go on to the pricing part and scroll down to the very bottom, it will actually show you a free solution, which is this. So here you can see that you can register a max of 100 queues and a max of 10,000 messages, right? And then you have an idle time of 28 days, which is very good if you are doing like development, like R&D work, or you want to try out Rabbitmq really quickly, right? So this comes in really handy if you don't want the hassle of installing the system, right? So it's free. You can just install it, register it, and you'll get this UI. Okay. So going back, next up, we actually need to configure or put in the settings for the Rabbitmq. And I have also linked in a source link. So if I open this up, so this actually gives you the prerequisites, like how you want to install it. So here the example is for Ubuntu, right? I gave the example for CentOS. So once that is done, you actually have a command line. Also, you can use the command to register this, or you can just directly update in your app etc env.php, in which you have the host, the port number, the username, the password, and your virtual host, right? And also, if you are using it on production, you want an SSL configuration, that is also possible in Magento. For our demo, we are not using this part, right? But this is there, so I'll just show you in a while. And other options are here as well, right? So if I go back to my terminal and then just do a cat on my env.php, you'll see that it's already configured here. So it starts with a q key, and then you have an AMQP, and then you have host. The host name is Rabbitmq because I'm using a container, so the container host name is Rabbitmq. The port number is 5672. This is by default, and by default, when you are registering or installing Rabbitmq, you get an admin user of guest username and guest password. But if you want, you can actually delete that user and create your own admin user. And finally, you have a virtual host. So virtual host is nothing, it's similar. So coming back to our UI. So here, if you notice that we are running it on the same domain as my application, but with a different port number. So it is 15672, which is where our UI is running. So that's a different port number. So here on the top, you'll see that this dashboard updates every 5 seconds, right? And you can change it to 10 seconds or not refresh at all, right? And then you have like your virtual host with all your host or / or you can register your own virtual host. So what this does is actually helps you compartmentalize queues on the same Rabbitmq server. So virtual host is pretty much the same like you have Nginx, right? And you have multiple different hosts running different applications. Same way you can configure Rabbitmq. So if you have a single Rabbitmq solution and you have like a / running Laravel, then you have another virtual host running some other application. So you can very easily compartmentalize the queues and see what is happening on an individual level. So here this is the dashboard, here how it looks like. So you get a little bit of graphs and everything on the operations, what is happening and things like that. Next, you have the connections. So connections is like when we activate a consumer, it will actually show here that these are the consumers that are connecting to your what you can say, your RabbitMQ server. Then you have the exchange. So exchange is nothing like the example I showed you, right? So the example was of the watchman of your bank, who is responsible for identifying your purpose of visiting the bank and direct you to the correct line or the queue. So same way we have the exchange right here. So out of box, Magento creates an exchange called Magento, but we have also, this was my demo, so I was like fiddling around a little bit to understand like how it works. So here you'll see the type. Okay, so type here are quite a few we have. So we have direct, fan out, topic and header, but unfortunately Magento only supports topic, right? So there are direct, where you can have like one-on-one connections. Then you have fan out, in which like all the queues that are mapped to that particular exchange, it actually pushes it out to all the queues, right? It doesn't check for anything. And then you have headers as well. So this is also a little bit of advanced part, where you can put in headers in your messages, and from reading the headers it actually decides where the queue should end up. So the next is durability. So here it is durable, which means that it is not in memory, it actually is persisted in the disk. So in case of like a restart of your RabbitMQ server, these exchanges will not be deleted, right? And then you have the queues, of course. Again, I created a queue for my like own demo practice, right? So here also the same thing. If I click on it, you'll actually see that it is actually mapped to this exchange. So any message that comes in actually comes to this exchange. The routing key is this. So this is the topic, right? And then it actually ends up onto your queue. So it is actually bound together to this queue. So I'll show you the demo, it will make more sense. And then finally you have the admin part. So here you can actually create like new admin users, or just change it to like only people who can monitor, who can do nothing, only for management purposes and things like that. You can also create your own virtual hosts and things like that. You can put in limitations on like how many maximum connections you'll allow and things like that. So these kind of settings are also available here. So let's move on to our coding really quickly and try to register a new entity, right? So what we'll do is just copy this and paste it here. So the topic name would be the same, but I'll change it to Rabbitmq. Okay, and we have the request as string, the same as always. So instead of a string, we can also use like interfaces as well. So interfaces give you a really nice way of giving a structure to your messages. So here, instead of passing a string, I'll be actually passing an object which is actually converted into a JSON and then saved onto your queue. So let's put it here in the request, right? So this is the request structure which it will look for. So you can have like a message and you can have a date, right? So I'll just save this, right? Then moving on to the queue topology. So I'll just create a new exchange because I don't want to disturb this one. So here, instead of DB, I'll put AMQP exchange. So this will represent that AMQP is the exchange that I'm creating, a new exchange in our RabbitMQ server, and the connection again has to change to AMQP, right? So here again, binding, so unique binding for AMQP. So this again, it doesn't matter, can be any name, just has to be unique, right? So here the topic that I created, going back to my communication XML, I'll just copy this just in case I make any spelling mistakes, right? So I'll just bring it close to together, right? And here I'll just paste it right here. So RabbitMQ, I've put in the topic, and here I'll just change it to Meetup AMQP Q, right? So this is there. I have updated communications.xml, the queue topology.xml, and then also I need to update my publisher as well. So I'll just copy this, change it a little bit. So my topic name has changed to this. So I'll just copy that and put it in the publisher XML. I'll change the connection to AMQP, and then my exchange would be the newly registered exchange, which is this one. I'll copy that and then push it right here. And finally our consumer, so I'll just create a new consumer, right? So here I'll create like a QP consumer, just in case like we don't confuse it with others. The queue name, so if I go on to my queue, I'll just copy this, right, and then go back into the queue name and change it to the newly created queue, right? And the connection here also needs to change to AMQP, so I'll just change that. This again, as I told you, is an issue with Magento, doesn't work, right? And I'll use the same demo consumer class, right? But instead of passing in a string, what I'm going to take in is the interface, which is this one. So copy that, paste it here and save, right? So now going back here, I've done this. And another thing that needs to happen is that you need to create a concrete class of that interface. So I've already done that. So it's a data model that I've created. I've added the getters and setters for the date and the message that we need, right? And then I actually have also created a DI XML to add a preference for that interface and map it to our concrete class, right? So these are all done. So I'm just double checking once again. So it would be our meetup demo Rabbitmq. The request class is the interface, and this is also going to be asynchronous. Next, we move on to the topology. We have a newly registered exchange, which is again topic type topic, because the others are not supported. Next, we have the connection, that is AMQP. So the bind ID again is something unique that you can put in. The topic is nothing but one that we have registered right here, and we are telling it that whenever a message is published to this topic, a queue by the name, this queue name, which is meetup AMQP queue, should receive the message. And then we have the publishers ready, which is telling that this is the topic, and whenever I publish to this topic, I actually am telling that this is the connection and this is the exchange that you need to look into. So the message is actually passed on to this exchange. The exchange actually picks it up, finds the routing key, and then maps it to the queue. And then I have our consumer, which is our meetup AMQP consumer. We have the new queue name put in. We have changed the connection AMQP. We have the old classes put in. And if I go back to the demo class, here what I'll do is try to echo out, let's say, the message, right? Because now I'll receive this as an object instead of just a string, right? So internally, Magento takes care of all the data conversions and everything. So if you go the Magento way, you don't have to work with like JSON serialization, unserialization, and things like that. It'll actually do all of that for you, right? So hopefully I made a little bit of a sense. I apologize, I didn't prepare these classes beforehand. I just wanted to show you the process which you need to go through. I can understand there are a lot of XML files. Magento loves XML, unfortunately, right? And there is something that we have to like learn through. Okay, so this is the sequence in which we need to go through. Communication XML, then the topology, then the publisher, and finally our queue consumer, right? So if I have done everything right, let me purge my cache. Okay, cache purged. I'll do a setup upgrade now. So setup upgrade will actually pick up these new changes that I have registered for my AMQP connections, right? And it will try to register all of these new exchanges, these new queues to our Rabbitmq if you have done everything correctly. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see what happens. So in the meanwhile this happens, I'll just try to prep my I think my test file right here. So the test file actually needs to change a little bit, so I hope everybody can see my text editor. Okay, this is the suspense where it will either throw an error or it will actually go through completely. And this is a thriller. Okay, in the meanwhile, so this remains pretty much the same. The publisher is going to be the same thing, but what happens internally is the publisher actually picks up these XMLs and tries to understand where the publishing needs to happen. So as you can see this right here, so this is where the publisher picks up the setting saying that, oh, the connection is Rabbitmq, I need to publish it to this exchange. And this exchange is actually telling the message, okay, so your routing name is this, which is your topic name, you need to land to this queue, right? So if we have done everything right, we should be able to do this. So nothing to import came here. So if I just do check, so here we have our newly registered exchange, fortunately, and here we have our newly registered queue, which is this one. That is also very fortunate. If I click on it, it will say that it is actually bound to this exchange and with this routing key. So routing key is nothing but our topic name. So now this one is quite okay. The second part that I need to put in is our message. So now our message is not that simple. Our message is an object, so we'll initialize an object. So here again I'm using object manager. Please don't use it on your code. This is just for demo purposes only, right? So once the data is initialized, what we will do is try to set a message. So where is this getting from? We are getting it from here. So set message, right? So set message is supposed to take up a string. So I'll just pass a string saying that this message is for Rabbitmq, right? And then we have a date as well. So we'll set the date as well. So set date. If I am not doing any spelling mistake, once again set date, and then we have a date in place. So I'll put today's date, but of course you can use like PHP's functions as well. So date function you can put in, right? So once those things are put in, we can just pass it on to the data part right here, right? And here in the topic name, we need to change it to the newest topic, which is this one right here. I'll copy that and put it right here, save it. Okay, let's not take any chances. I'll put my date 2020, not a good year. So it's 20, and I think we are pretty much done here. So another check, we have the publisher, we publishing to the new queue, the queue name is correct, the topic name is correct, and then we have the data we initialize the interface, which actually got us the concrete class. We set the data according to the getters and setters we have put in here, and then we passed it to the publisher. What can go wrong? Let's see. So here if I refresh it, so again we purged our cache previously, so this is going to take a little bit of time to like publish or like invoke our actual code, which is this one right here, and we wait very nervously, fingers crossed, seeing what happens. In the meanwhile, we'll try to see if our new consumer is available in our list. So what happened? Okay, I messed up somewhere. Yep, there we go. Sometimes PHP Storm is not that intelligent. So I'll refresh it one more time and it's done. So if I go back to my queue and go into my AMQP queue, you'll see actual get messages and then get the messages. you'll actually see that my message has been published right here. For some reason I was not able to publish my date. What happened? Not so sure. Anyways, so now going back to our list, so if I press enter, I should see our newly registered AMQP consumer right here, right? So now what I'll do is I'll start our consumer, put it here and enter, and as you can see, it actually picked up our message right away from the consumer. Now if I do get messages one more time, it will actually throw an notice saying that the queue is empty. Why? Because what happens is Rabbitmq is that once the message is consumed properly and acknowledged by our code, it is actually deleted from the queue itself. So that's pretty much it. I hope everybody liked the demo. Hope I was able to clear some of the doubts or make everybody super confused. So I'm now open for questions if anybody is still awake.
If any errors are coming while pausing, where it will be displayed?
Picking up. Okay, now 1 second. I think Anshu Mishra has actually put in saying that the first slide you are comparing crons and queues, but I think they are not compatible because we need crons to make consumers keep running, at least in the case of MS and queues. Otherwise the consumers will stop after the job. And am I right? Correct. Yes. Okay, so let's Anshu, I'll just answer your question in 2 minutes, and can you please repeat your question? Sorry, I was a little bit distracted with the question.
Okay. While pausing the messages, maybe some records may throw error, right? So where we can see that error?
So errors are actually, you can log them, right? So you can, so if I go back to my consumer right here, so you can throw an exception, right? And not catch it in this process. So what it will do is actually the while loop that it is running, it actually will requeue the entire message onto the queue itself. So it will do some retries and before it fails completely. So it actually doesn't have a separate queue for like error queues, but you can actually log these to identify if a message is failing.
Okay.
Okay, now coming back to Anshu's question. So yes, unfortunately Magento has a very janky kind of a setup to run queues. So what happens is that, so I hope this part was clear. So now coming back to our cron. So what happens is that in production you won't go into your server and actually start this service, right? Something actually has to happen automatically so that these consumers get initialized automatically, right? So what happens is that internally Magento actually has a cron running, which is called the consumer cron runners, right? So if I open that up really quickly, so runner, yep. So here this is the cron job that is actually mapped up. So if I go up a little bit here, if I can see, so this is the cron job, so this is the cron name, and this is the process that it is running, and it is actually running every second, right? So what it does is actually picks up a couple of things. The first thing is that an env setting called cron run, right? So what happens is that in your env.php, you actually have the flexibility to tell Magento not to run these consumers via cron. So why do we want that? So that we can actually have a better monitoring. So what happens internally in Magento, that a cron runs and it actually internally starts background processes for the consumers. But as I'll show you, it actually has a lot of limitations. So the first limitation is that it actually runs a single thread consumer. So which means that for every queue, there is only one consumer running. But if you have very heavy queues where messages are flowing in really big, you can't rely on this cron job to actually execute the queues, right? So here the first setting that it checks is that can it run the consumers using a cron job, which is actually by default to true. If like nothing is provided here, it will actually default to true, right? So if that is true, then it will actually check for max messages as well. So max messages, as I showed in the demo, is like the amount of messages a single consumer can consume, right? And before it dies. So what happens is that this cron actually runs every second, and if a consumer is already running, it will not run again. So here there is a method called can be run, right? So internally what it does is actually checks the PS logs or the process logs of your system, and then try to identify if the consumer is running. If it is already running, nothing happens, but if it is not running, it will actually instantiate a job, right? So and then finally the cron runners. So here you can actually what you can say restrict the cron. So here this is what is known as the allowed list. So if you list these cron jobs right here, so if it is empty, then all the all the consumers are executed. But if it is not and you put in some of them, these are the allowed lists. So only consumer 1 and consumer 2 will be actually picked up by this cron and instantiated in the background. Rest all the consumers will not. So why would you want to do this? So unfortunately, due to time restriction, I was not able to provide the supervisor setup, which I will try to do in the next meetup, which will happen in the next 15 days, where you can actually control all of these settings, where you can fire multiple instances of a consumer. You can actually run these things in the background. 1 second, I can take a screenshot for all the people who have joined. Kindly wait. Okay. So what I was telling, I lost my chain of thoughts. Yeah. So supervisor, if you look it up, it actually helps you run background jobs, which is here. It actually is recommended by Magento as well. So it actually helps you run background jobs. Unfortunately, I don't have a demo ready. So where you can actually run a consumer with multiple instances, like you can provide like 5 instances of this should run, right? And then you can start and stop those consumers. Here, unfortunately, in Magento, if you are running a consumer by the cron, you don't actually have a command to kill it. So for killing the consumer, what you have to do is actually look into the process list, find the ID, and then kill it, right? So if you have a heavy consumer implementation or an architecture with Rabbitmq, I would highly suggest, if possible, using supervisor. Where you have very fine-grained control over like what consumers are running, how many processes you need it to be run. If it is has an error, how many times it needs to retry to start the consumer. If it is failing, then it will strike you out with a mail saying that these consumers are not working. So even though Magento has this implementation of a cron to fire the consumers in the background, it will not work if you have a very high performing setup. The other thing not to use this cron is to have a separate consumer setup. So sometimes what happens, you have a bunch of crons running on the same server as the consumers as well, and that actually affects the CPU performances. So that is also one of the things where we can have a separate server for running just the consumers as well. So I hope I was able to give you a little bit of an understanding of how it runs in the production as well, and when to use this out-of-box cron setup and when you can use a supervisor setup as well. Any more questions? I think no. Milind, I think we are done. My presentation is also over. I think a lot of us survived, right?
Yes, Atish. I'm very thankful that I am able to get like things which are I'm not sure what are these things. Okay, a lot of things are there about queues. For example, I was not aware that multiple queues can be handled for a single topic. Okay, multiple consumers can be there configured. Okay, so very thank you to you, Atish. Okay, and one more thing I want to share with you all guys. As Nitish didn't sleep last night and spent the whole the time preparing the slides and the topic. Okay, he is very much dedicated, and I'm very thankful for his dedication for this meetup.
Not really
Okay,
dedicated, just lazy.
so and the explanation was very clear. Okay, even the demo was very clear. I'm not sure how I did, but yours were very clear. Okay.
No, I actually did a setup when you were doing the grumps and like demo. I was actually doing a setup on my local as well. So I
Okay.
did parallelly what you were doing, and it was working on my local as well. So
Okay.
that's good for me.
So it's a great presentation. I think we can do this again in a several other meetups. Maybe in meetup in Nagpur or in Pune. Okay. We can do this again, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
And
okay.
and anybody who would like to share anything, we are open for 5 more minutes, and then we can take let's take a screenshot before, then we can have a discussion or anything. Anybody want to share any thought? Okay. Uh, just take a screenshot. Okay. Okay, I took the screenshot, and it's good. Okay, so anybody want to share anything or want a topic? Yes, I did few I prepared few topics for next presentation, which are we are including that Mage Run CLI, that it has a dev console for next meetup. And I think Christian from Integer from Germany, there's a company in Germany, M2 company, and Christian Munch will be joining us as a guest speaker for the next meetup, maybe next month or after next month. Okay, so the topic will be on Mage Run CLI. It's a CLI developed by him only. Okay, so that will be for next presentation. Beside that, we have I get 2 PHP Storm and JetBrains licenses every month to distribute in the meetup. So anybody in need of any ID license can contact me, or just ping in the WhatsApp group. And I have shared the WhatsApp join link so that any communication further this meetup can be done there. If the link is not there, I can add. Okay. Shared above. So I'm just sharing it again in case somebody missed. Okay, so I think we did Google Meet performed very well. I was not sure whether it's gonna handle the meetup or not, because we are used to do on the Zoom and other platforms. Okay, anybody want to add anything? And then we can say goodbye and enjoy the weekend. Okay, and Atish, you can sleep as well.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep now. And for the question, I think somebody asked for preparation guide for the certification exams, right? So,
Okay.
I think Milind already is hosting. I think has a site on the notes that he had been, I think, repurposed from a GitHub account. So Milind can share it on the group here as
Yes,
well,
yes, yes,
and
yes,
plus
yes.
I think I have one in the exchange as well. So one
My
second.
guide is, I think I copied from few sources. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
added them as a credit. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you can visit the site. It's very mobile compatible, and most of the Magento 2 nodes are there, and this is the repository link. Even if something is missing, you can add to the repository. Is open source. Okay, and the website which is working on it, it's a PWA. Okay, you can just go through this PWA. Oh, sorry, I shared it again. Just give me a minute. I'm sharing the PWA link. Okay, this is the PWA link. I will share it in the WhatsApp group as well. And if you all joined, I will you can get all the updates from there also. Okay. So beside this, anybody need of ID licenses can contact me on WhatsApp or email or WhatsApp group anywhere. I will share them. Okay. And That's all, I think. It's great that we are able to join more than 20 people. Okay. So Atish, thank you for like doing a workshop.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm hoping that once I get my Nagpur meetup up and running, I would be able to invite you as well for a presentation.
Yes, sure, I will join.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone who attended this meetup on their weekend, and hopefully you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, Atish. Bye bye group. Bye bye everyone.